My name is Josephina, and I was 31 years old when I realized the people who raised me felt entitled to the future I worked 6 years to build. I saved $120,000 by doing everything people say you should do when you want stability. I worked long hours. I skipped vacations. I said no to dinners, weekends away, impulse purchases. I watched friends get married, buy homes, post smiling photos, while I quietly built something for myself. Every dollar had a story. Over time, checks I didn't celebrate, bonuses I never touched. Nights I chose ramen over cocktails because the goal mattered more than comfort. Owning a home wasn't a dream to me. It was a finish line, proof that I could stand on my own without needing anyone's permission. By August, the money was there. $120,000 sitting in my account, waiting for the right listing. The market was unpredictable, and the house I wanted slipped through my fingers at the last minute. I didn't want to leave that kind of money sitting somewhere vulnerable. Scams, fraud, banks freezing accounts, all of it made me uneasy. My parents had a safe, not a little one. A massive steel safe bolted into their basement floor. My dad bought it years ago after a break-in down the street and loved to brag that it could survive a fire. I trusted that safe the way I trusted them. I brought the money over and told them it would only be for a few weeks. They were proud. My mom teared up. She told me she admired my discipline. I showed them listings. I talked about neighborhoods. They cooked dinner that night. I left feeling secure in a way that's hard to describe, like I'd finally reached a point where my life was moving forward and the people who mattered were supporting me. 3 weeks later, my brother Aaron got married. Aaron has always been charming. That's the word people use when they don't want to say unreliable. He floats from plan to plan, job to job, always landing softly. Somehow he'd found someone willing to marry him, Liz, and everyone acted like this was proof he'd finally matured. I bought them a $2,000 honeymoon gift card, a ridiculous gesture I regret every time I think about it now. The wedding was beautiful. I smiled, I danced. I never once suspected anything was wrong. The text came 4 days later. My mom wrote, "So happy Aaron and Liz are settling into their new condo. It's perfect for them." I was sitting in my car after work when I read it. I reread it 3 times, convinced I misunderstood. I hadn't heard anything about a condo. I assumed maybe it was rented or that Liz's parents helped, but something cold settled in my stomach before I even called. No answer. I drove straight to my parents' house. My dad was outside mowing the lawn like it was any other day. Inside, they didn't dodge it. They didn't apologize. My mom said it calmly, like she was explaining a recipe. They used the money. It was for family. Aaron and Liz needed stability now that they were married. Aaron was going to get serious about work. I was still single, still young, and would bounce back. I reminded them it wasn't a gift, that it was my money, that I trusted them to hold it temporarily. My dad told me not to be selfish, said this is what families do, that I'd understand once I had a husband. That was the moment something cracked. I told them I would be speaking to a lawyer and the police. My mom called me vindictive, said I was trying to destroy the family. Aaron didn't even show up. He sent me a message later that night. "You're being harsh. This is temporary. You'll get it back eventually." Eventually. The next morning I filed a police report, and that was only the beginning. After I filed the police report, I didn't feel brave. I felt sick. There's a specific kind of nausea that comes from realizing you've crossed a line you can't uncross, even when you know you had no other choice. I drove home in silence, replaying my parents' faces as they said it was for family, like that phrase explained everything. They said it so easily, like they'd been practicing it, like the words themselves were supposed to soften the theft. I went back to their house the next day because part of me still needed to hear it again, needed to be sure I hadn't misunderstood. My mom met me at the door with that tight smile she uses when she thinks she's being reasonable. My dad stood behind her, arms crossed, already annoyed. They repeated the story without changing a single detail. Aaron and Liz needed a down payment. They were starting a life. This was an investment in the family. I reminded them that I'd never agreed to that I'd trusted them to hold the money for a few weeks, not spend it. My dad shook his head and told me I was being dramatic, that money always comes back, but family doesn't. When I asked why they didn't even ask me first, my mom said she knew I'd say no. She said that like it was justification, not confession. She told me I was independent, strong, that I didn't need help the way Aaron did. She said I was still young, still flexible, and that I'd have my turn later. Hearing my future reduced to a vague promise was worse than hearing the money was gone. It meant they never saw my goals as urgent or real. Aaron still didn't come. He didn't call. He didn't show up. He sent another message instead, telling me I was making a big deal out of nothing, that this was temporary, that I should be happy for him. He told me I'd always been better with money anyway. That line stuck with me, not because it was cruel, but because it was honest. In his mind, my discipline existed to cover his recklessness. When I told my parents I wasn't dropping the report, my mom's voice finally cracked. She accused me of turning my back on my own blood, of humiliating them, of ruining Aaron's fresh start. She said people would talk. She said no one would understand why I'd do this to my own family. My dad warned me that once lawyers got involved, there was no going back. I told him there already wasn't. That night, I didn't respond to any calls. I didn't answer texts. I sat in my apartment staring at the walls, realizing that the people who taught me right from wrong were now trying to convince me that theft was love if it benefited the right person. I changed my passwords. I froze my credit. I called my bank and told them to flag my account in case anyone tried to impersonate me. I wasn't paranoid. I was prepared. The silence lasted about a day and a half. Then the siege started. My dad came to my apartment first. I watched him through the peephole as he knocked, paced, knocked again. He stayed for 15 minutes, long enough to make it clear he expected me to open the door eventually. I didn't. The next day, my mom sent me a long email explaining how Aaron had finally turned a corner, how the condo was an investment for all of us, how pressing charges would destroy the family. She used that phrase again, destroy the family, like I was holding the match instead of standing in the ashes. By the end of the week, my voicemail was full. My aunt called, then a cousin, then Liz's mother, asking if I could be more understanding, because they were newlyweds. That was the call that broke something in me. I blocked her without answering. I realized then that this wasn't going to resolve quietly, and it wasn't going to resolve kindly. They had chosen their version of the story, and it didn't include me as anything other than the villain. That was when Megan stepped in. She came over with leftover Chinese food and listened while I told her everything, start to finish. She didn't interrupt. She didn't soften it. When I finished, she looked at me and said the simplest thing anyone had said since this began. They stole $120,000 from you. Hearing it stated that plainly snapped me out of the fog. This wasn't complicated. This wasn't family drama. This was a crime dressed up as sacrifice. Megan gave me the number of her lawyer friend Cassandra. Cold, direct, no patience for emotional manipulation. Cassandra reviewed the texts, the emails, the bank records, and told me we had a strong case. She said my parents' admission alone was enough to move forward, but she also warned me that once we served them, things would get ugly. Families don't like being held accountable. I told her to proceed, and that was the moment I knew there was no way back to the family I thought I had. After Cassandra filed the papers, I went quiet in a way that felt unnatural at first. No calls, no texts, no explaining myself to anyone who asked. I locked everything down like I was preparing for a storm. I changed passwords, froze my credit, set alerts on every account I had. I even warned my bank that no one but me was authorized to move funds, just in case someone tried one last desperate reach. I told myself this was temporary, that once the money came back, the noise would stop. I didn't understand yet that the noise wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. 36 hours passed before they tried a different approach. My parents showed up together this time. I saw them through the peephole, standing side by side like they were rehearsing for a photo. My dad knocked first, firm and rhythmic, the way he used to knock on my bedroom door when I was a teenager and he'd already decided the conversation. My mom stood slightly behind him, arms folded, face set in that wounded expression she saves for when she wants sympathy without accountability. I didn't open the door. I watched as my dad paced the hallway, checked his phone, knocked again. 15 minutes later, they left. The silence after felt heavier than the knocking. The next day, my mom emailed me again. 5 paragraphs this time. She wrote about sacrifice and loyalty, about how Aaron had always struggled, and how I had always been strong. She framed the condo as an investment in all our futures, like one day I'd thank them for teaching me this lesson. She warned me that lawyers would poison everything, that strangers would turn family against each other, that once this went to court, there would be no healing. I read it twice, then archived it without replying. By Friday, the extended family joined in. My aunt called, then my cousin. Even Liz's mom reached out, asking if I could be more understanding, because marriage was hard and money made people emotional. That call sent a heat through my chest I hadn't felt yet. I blocked her mid-sentence. It was clear now that my parents weren't just defending themselves. They were recruiting. They were rewriting the story in real time, casting me as greedy, cold, ungrateful. They were betting that if enough people repeated it, I'd cave just to make it stop. Megan stayed close during that week. She didn't ask how I was doing in the soft way people usually do. She asked practical questions. Had I eaten? Had I slept? Had I checked my email? When I told her I felt like I was losing my entire family over money, she didn't correct me. She said, "You're losing them because they chose Aaron's comfort over your future." Hearing it put that way stripped the guilt down to something manageable. Painful, but manageable. Cassandra moved fast. She had my parents officially served at their house during dinner. She didn't ask me if that was okay. She told me it was necessary. The fallout was immediate. Aaron called first. 4 words, sharp and furious. "What the hell, Josephina?" I didn't answer. My dad followed with a voicemail so loud and aggressive I had to pull the phone away from my ear. He accused me of being brainwashed, of letting outsiders turn me against my own blood. He said suing your parents was the lowest thing a person could do. My mom's email that night dropped any pretense of kindness. She called me vindictive, said I was humiliating them, ruining Aaron's future, embarrassing the family name. She wrote that they had done nothing wrong and that one day I'd regret this. I didn't reply to any of it. Not because I was being strong, but because I was empty. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall, realizing that even if I got every dollar back, there was no version of this where we went back to how things were. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd chosen a side, and it wasn't mine. The next morning, Aaron took it public. He posted a long, carefully vague rant on social media about greedy people who destroy families over money. He didn't name me, but he didn't have to. Liz jumped into the comments almost immediately, defending him, saying they'd done nothing wrong and people didn't know the whole story. By lunchtime, the post had dozens of comments, some cheering him on, some asking questions. I didn't respond, but people started messaging me privately. Old friends, former classmates, some just wanted gossip. Others asked quietly if it was true that my parents had taken the money without asking. Yes, I wrote back over and over. Yes, they did. That was when Cassandra called to tell me my parents had filed a motion to dismiss. Their lawyer argued it was a family matter, not a legal one. Cassandra's response went out the same day, attached with bank withdrawal records, text messages, and my mother's own email admitting they used the money. The judge denied the motion and scheduled a hearing. That was the moment the walls started closing in. That night, my parents called together and left a voicemail I'll never delete. My mom begged me to come to dinner and talk like adults. My dad said we could work this out privately and stop embarrassing ourselves. The way he said ourselves told me everything. They still thought I'd fold, that I'd show up, cry, forgive, and let them keep what they'd taken. They had no idea what it had already cost me to get here. A week later, they filed a formal statement claiming the money was a gift. They said I'd willingly contributed to help Aaron start his married life. They even attached the $2,000 wedding gift I'd given him as proof I intended to support them. Reading that felt like being slapped. They were going to lie under oath. They were going to rewrite the story completely and dare me to prove otherwise. Megan came over that night with takeout and sat with me while I stared at the ceiling. I told her I never thought it would go this far. She said it already had. I was just the only one brave enough to stop pretending it hadn't. And that was when I decided there would be no half measures, no guilt, no second guessing. If they wanted war, I would meet them with truth and let the truth do the damage. Court started the way most things like this do, quietly and deceptively calm. No shouting, no drama, just the soft scrape of chairs, the tick of a wall clock, and people pretending they weren't about to dismantle each other under oath. I sat across from my parents and Aaron, studying faces I'd known my entire life. My mother wore her pearls like armor, the same ones she saved for church fundraisers and weddings. My dad stared at the table with practiced boredom. Aaron leaned back in his chair, confident, almost relaxed, like this was an inconvenience he expected to breeze through. That confidence hurt more than anger would have. It meant they truly believed I wouldn't win. Their lawyer opened with the story they'd been polishing for weeks: family misunderstanding, willing contribution, a generous sister helping a younger brother start married life. He used phrases like mutual support and shared values. He said I was now trying to turn a loving gesture into a vendetta. When he spoke, my parents nodded slightly, like this was the version they'd rehearsed at home. Then Aaron took the stand. He lied easily. That was the worst part. He smiled when he talked about how close we were growing up, how I'd always been there for him. He said I told him, if I can help, I will, and framed it like a promise instead of a vague sentence said years ago over Christmas dinner when helping meant rides to interviews. He said he thought the money was a blessing, that he was shocked I was upset. He talked about how hard it is to be newly married and how grateful he was for family support. He sounded sincere. If I hadn't been living this, I might have believed him too. My mother followed, voice soft, wounded, practiced. She said I'd always struggled with control, that maybe I was upset Aaron married first. She said I used to tell her money didn't matter to me, that I cared more about independence than possessions. My dad talked about sacrifice, about raising 2 children so different, about how families sometimes have to make hard choices for the greater good. Cassandra sat perfectly still beside me, pen resting on her legal pad, eyes forward. I could see the corner of her mouth twitch once when my mom claimed I didn't care about money. Then it was our turn. Cassandra didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She laid out dates, numbers, documents, the exact day I transferred the money. The messages where my mom admitted they used it, the listings I'd printed and shown them, the timeline that made it impossible to pretend this was spontaneous generosity. She presented bank records that matched withdrawals to the condo down payment within days. The room shifted subtly, not outrage, but attention. Even my parents looked uneasy. Then came the recess. I stepped into the hallway to breathe, heart hammering, when I saw Liz standing near the vending machine. She looked like someone who'd wandered into the wrong building by mistake. Her eyes met mine, and she walked straight over. I didn't know where the money came from, she said quietly, like she'd been holding it in all day. I didn't respond. I didn't trust anything anymore. She kept going anyway. Aaron told me your parents were helping. I thought it was their money or a loan. After the wedding, I asked him, and he told me not to bring it up, that you were okay with it. She swallowed. I knew he was lying. I still didn't say anything. Then she said the sentence that changed everything. If they call me, I'm telling the truth. And she walked away. I didn't tell Cassandra right away. I needed to see if Liz meant it. The next morning they called her. I watched from my seat as she took the stand, hands shaking slightly, eyes fixed on the judge. She said she'd always felt something was off, that I looked genuinely surprised when the condo came up. She admitted she never saw any evidence of me offering that kind of help. She said Aaron told her I didn't need the money and was just bitter. Then she said it plainly, without drama. I didn't know it was hers. If I had, I wouldn't have accepted it. My parents didn't look at her. Aaron stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. The room felt different after that, like the air had thinned. Cassandra didn't need to do much more. The lie had collapsed under its own weight. We left the courtroom without a ruling that day. The judge said a decision would be issued within 10 days. Standard procedure, anticlimactic. But the damage was already done. That night, Aaron texted me 3 words. You ruined everything. I blocked him without replying. The next morning, Cassandra called. Her voice was steady. The judge issued a preliminary statement, she said. It's in your favor. Full repayment plus legal fees. 30 days. I hung up and sat there staring at my phone, not celebrating, not crying. Megan brought champagne that evening. I didn't open it. I just sat on the couch and let the reality settle. The money was coming back, but something else was already gone, and I wasn't sure I'd ever get it back. The money hit my account early in the morning, so quietly it almost felt unreal. I was halfway through an email when the notification popped up. $124,800, the full amount plus the legal fees the judge ordered them to pay. I stared at the number for a long time, waiting for some rush of relief or triumph to arrive. It didn't. Instead, there was a hollow stillness, like the end of a long argument where no one actually wins. The fight was over, but the cost was sitting heavy in my chest. Megan showed up 10 minutes later with bagels and coffee like she'd timed it on purpose. She didn't ask if the money came through. She just looked at me and nodded. I nodded back. After a while, she said, This means you can go house hunting again. I knew she was right, but the idea didn't spark joy the way it used to. That money had once meant freedom and possibility. Now it felt like evidence, proof of what they were willing to take and what I had been forced to do to get it back. Around noon, I checked my voicemail. I hadn't planned to, but some part of me needed to hear what they said now that it was finished. The first message was my dad. His voice was flat, controlled. He said I'd made my choice and shouldn't bother calling again. He said I could keep the money since that's what mattered to me. The second message was Aaron. He called me pathetic, said I'd ruined everyone's lives over a down payment, told me he hoped I enjoyed my empty little house alone. The third was my mom. She didn't say my name. She didn't say she loved me. She just said, "You broke us," and hung up. By the end of the day, I was blocked everywhere. Phone, email, social media, even distant relatives went quiet, and then the package arrived. A plain brown box with no return address, but I knew immediately who it was from. Inside were pieces of my childhood, things they'd kept for decades. A snow globe I gave my mom on a middle school trip, a birthday card I made for my dad when I was 10, old photos of me and Aaron as kids, some bent, some torn. At the bottom was the wedding card I gave Aaron, the one with the $2,000 check still sealed inside. No note, just rejection packed tight. I sat on the floor going through it while Megan watched silently. She picked up one of the photos and said, "It's like they're trying to erase you." Maybe they were. Maybe that was the final punishment. If they couldn't control me, they'd pretend I never existed. I realized then how much of my life I'd spent trying to be the responsible one, the reliable daughter, the sister who didn't cause trouble. I put my own life on hold for stability, skipped relationships, ignored burnout, all to build something real. They took it, then blamed me for being angry. I bought the house anyway. Closing day came and went without celebration. I signed the papers, took the keys, nodded when the title officer congratulated me, and walked out feeling like I'd just finished another court filing instead of buying my first home. The house was small, a little outdated, but it was mine. I moved in alone on a Monday with a mattress on the floor and 2 suitcases. The rooms echoed. That first night, standing in the kitchen holding a glass of water, I realized I'd achieved the goal I worked half my life for, and it felt like nothing. Weeks later, my mom sent one last thing, a Christmas card with no return address. Inside was a photo of Aaron and Liz in front of their condo, holding their baby. No message, no signature, just the image. I stood there for a long moment, then shredded it and dropped it in the trash. That was the moment something permanent settled inside me. I didn't just lose trust. I lost the kind of love that assumes family is forever. And it didn't come back. Now, when people ask what happened, I say it's a long story. I've learned to live with the quiet, to build a life that doesn't include people who chose convenience over my future. I got the money back, I got the house. But what I really got was clarity. They crossed a line I will never walk back over. And for the first time, I stopped waiting for them to understand.